I recently made a video about Cubans being deported in Florida, and it kind of opened up some interesting conversations. A lot of people just assume that everybody who's getting deported is here illegally. Many people that are being deported actually try to do things the legal way, but the federal government turned their backs on them. People are literally disappearing with these ICE arrests, and there's no way you can even look up what's happening to these people. When they get caught by ICE, they don't publish it, they don't put it on an online list. If you try to research what happened to somebody, you don't know what happened to them. It's like they mysteriously disappear off the face of the earth. Do you think that ICE should have more accountability and that more information should be available to the American public regarding ICE and immigration arrests? Why is this information so sensitive that it can't be published to the public? And why is it so hard for us to know who's actually being arrested for ICE and immigration holds? It seems like ICE doesn't answer phone calls, doesn't get back to emails, doesn't have a place where they list who's being arrested, detained, and why. And if your family members disappear, there's no way to even find out exactly what happened to them. And keep in mind that many people that are being deported, they're not criminals. They're not people who enter the country illegally. They're people who tried to do it the legal way, but now the federal government isn't letting them move forward with obtaining their U.S. residency. It's basically people that got stalled out by the federal government, and now all of a sudden they disappear. You can't track them down. You can't find out where they're at. There's no information about it. You can't pull body cam footage on them. You can't get anything. It's a complete instant disappearance. Should it be that way? And why are so many people risking their lives to go on these crazy journeys? Risking their lives, risking their freedom, breaking the law, and putting themselves in all types of horrible situations to go to a country that doesn't want them there and doesn't even offer them the same opportunities that their home country does. Millions of people have fled countries like Dominican Republic, Venezuela, Cuba, but don't think that there aren't people in those countries that aren't living good. It's just that not everybody in those countries has access to those opportunities. So in today's video, we're also going to clarify some of the ignorances that we have regarding why people come to the United States and how life really is in other countries. But the main thing I want to focus on first is the notion that when people get detained by ICE, you can't pull a body cam footage on them. You can't get any information. You can't contact these agencies. It seems like there's a real lack of due process, especially considering that many of these people were admitted into the United States legally. These are not people who entered the United States illegally. You can enter the United States legally and still be deported. It's the lack of due process and information and transparency that surrounds these people that has people worried as when their family members disappear. They literally can't get any information regarding the situation. There just isn't an avenue. Like today I spent a few hours on the phone sending emails, calling, just trying to get a hold of a real person. And if your family members get detained by ICE, who knows what happens to them. Not only in the United States, but throughout the whole world. It's not a secret that many times immigration officials are extorting the people that they detain for whatever reason. And this is definitely going to be a possibility in the state of Florida, for example, and in the United States where there's no transparency with these arrests. If somebody gets arrested, detained, nobody knows where they are. You can't look them up. You can't make a phone call. If these individuals want to extort the people that they're just supposed to deport, there isn't much in the way stopping it from happening. A lot of questions and very little answers. On today's video, we're going to dive deep into the situation of immigration in the United States. And also learn a little bit about how people are actually living in the United States. Many people believe that immigrants are just here leeching off the system, getting welfare checks, and getting all these benefits while Americans get nothing. There's a lot of Hispanics that have made a lot of fortunes in the United States, or they simply brought it from somewhere else. Have you ever thought about that for a second, idiot? That maybe they had a crap load of money back in their home country, but they had to come here for a safety reason, not a monetary reason. People are seriously mistaken and very, very ignorant with the reality of immigration in the United States, so let's talk about it. That's the sound you hear when you're trying to get any type of information about who is being held by ICE for a deportation. If it wasn't for some local agencies that publish exactly who they detained and sent off with an immigration ICE hold, if you want to know who is being arrested by ICE, there really is no answer to it. What's interesting is when an American is arrested, we're able to even go as far and pull the body cam footage of the arrest and know anything we want from the individual, including their address or any other information by Freedom of Information Act request. But when it comes to immigration, there is really no way for the public to know who is being arrested, and I think that should change. I believe we should know who exactly is being held by ICE and immigration and who is in these detention centers. Just like we're able to know who is in the county jail, we should be able to know who is being detained by ICE. After all, the United States is a country of transparency, but when it comes to who is being detained by ICE, it's very difficult to obtain information. They simply don't answer the phone, don't reply to emails, and anything that you ask these agencies is always a complete wall. In many cases, these individuals turn themselves in voluntarily to ICE and Border Patrol, and they were given a temporary status in a court hearing. So when people say these people are here illegally, that's not exactly the case. These people turn themselves into Border Patrol, and they accepted them, they vetted them, they registered them, and they gave them a court hearing. So these individuals are doing things the legal way, which is to turn yourself in and have your case heard by a judge. That's the way that works. So if somebody is already legally in the United States, they're not hiding to be here. The federal government put them on a temporary status. Many times they even get their U.S. residency eventually through that process. And there should be some type of accountability for somebody who is in the United States legally. But as of now, who is actually being detained by these raids and who is actually being deported is somewhat of a mystery. I've spent most of the day today trying to get information, calling, emailing, and looking up all types of different databases, trying to see who is being held by immigration. And even if you have somebody's specific name and log that into the registry, you don't really get any information. So as of now, when ICE and immigration detain somebody, that person practically doesn't exist. I believe there should be some type of accountability on who is being deported, and I believe that people in public should have access to this information. Just like I should be able to know who is in the Tampa jail, why they're there, and who they are. With even more reason, I think people should have access to knowing who is being deported and who is at what facility, just like any other person being detained. Now, the United States is allegedly a trendsetter in information and access to information, and of course transparency, right? At least that's the notion that we're told. But in reality, not every government agency works with transparency. Of course, if we as U.S. citizens get arrested, even your address can end up slapped on the internet. Many times people be careful what county they move to, because certain counties like Sarasota, for example, publish just about everything they can about you when you get arrested. But if somebody is illegal and they get arrested for a deportation, they practically don't exist. It would really make sense for you to be able to look at who is being detained, where, and why, just like any other arrest. Now, the way that immigration arrests are handled in the United States and in other countries as well, this isn't just a problem in the United States, is always an issue of mystery. And for the most part, most people who make trajectories across many different countries heading to a country like Chile or the United States looking for some type of political amnesty or whatever type of refugee status they would want, or even an illegal border crossing, these individuals always report that when they're dealing with immigration officers, they're abused, they're extorted, they're stolen from, and sometimes even put in really strange situations. For the most part, we've even heard cases here in Florida of immigration and ICE agents detaining people and then demanding money for their liberation. And when these arrests go completely unregistered, when these arrests go completely unrecorded, they don't exist practically. They don't have any type of accountability like other agencies do. One can only imagine that if these ICE agents wanted to, for example, extort people or do anything of that nature, that they really could get away with it. And this isn't a problem just in the United States. This is a global problem. Many people who've traveled to the United States or to Chile and have been deported from those countries have gone on YouTube and made stories about how their journeys were, warning other people about the dangers of illegal border crossings, which many people are not aware of at the time that they depart on these stupid ideas of crossing borders of many countries, going somewhere illegally. But for the most part, one of the most common things that they share on almost all their experiences is relating how they were extorted or robbed by immigration officials. And we would assume if this is a practice that happens in every country in the world, that the United States wouldn't be exempt from it. And it honestly seems like the immigration policies for a lot of countries right now is to let people enter their countries, and even when detaining them, letting people enter these countries, see these countries, receiving them horribly, making their existence impossible, and of course targeting them indiscriminately for crimes, offering them no protection, and then deporting them afterwards, as if a way of letting people in that country know that if you enter these countries, this is the way you're going to be treated. Because after all, there really isn't a solution to international immigration. Of course, the United States is not the only destination of people. Canada is an attractive country. Mexico is in way better shape than a lot of other countries. Argentina, Chile, the list goes on and on of countries that people migrate to. Take the case of Venezuelans. There's Venezuelans now in Peru, Colombia, the list goes on and on. Brazil, a lot of people from Haiti and Cuba are now going to Brazil as well. So the situation is a global situation. But it seems that countries that want to deter people from going to those countries, like Chile and the United States, have decided that perhaps the best method is to let people enter your country, reside in that country, make their existence in that country as miserable as possible, then deporting them. And in the process of doing that, of course, with no accountability, many misappropriations take place on purpose to deter these people from coming back to that country. And that in itself isn't really technically within the boundaries of the legalities that many countries proclaim that they have when dealing with people internationally, but perhaps it is the most effective method that governments have found to deter people from entering their countries. In the case of immigration in the United States, there really is no transparency, and this opens the window for a lot of misappropriation. I mean, go figure that people in cases where there is transparency find ways to corrupt the law. We're talking body cam footage, we're talking arrest records, we've seen people get arrested and charged with crimes in the United States, and then a local business will have a camera that depicts a completely different scenario. The charges have to be dropped, but the police officers who filed that false report sometimes don't even lose their jobs for doing it. In other words, governments always back their law enforcement agencies, even when they are caught red-handed doing something inappropriate, something that can sometimes ruin somebody's life who is innocent. That is the reality of law enforcement, and again, not only in the United States, but in every other country. For the most part, the United States isn't the most messed up place when it comes to law enforcement. Anybody who's traveled to Latin America knows for a fact that you can be detained by some law enforcement official and practically be extorted out of anything you have, and any type of issue will result in you having a very bad experience. That's the case in Mexico, Cuba, the Dominican Republic, Haiti, Guatemala, Salvador, Honduras, and just about every country you could think of. A few countries like the US, Canada, maybe Costa Rica have somewhat of a cleaner reputation, but in general, this is the way people are dealt with when they're in a country where they don't have rights. Today, traveling outside of your country to another country is a serious danger. People are full of hate, people are full of nationalism, and this isn't just in the United States, it's in just about every single country right now. Take the case of Dominicans and Haitians. Many times we've seen clear reports of Dominicans caught in Haiti being attacked and vice versa. So overall, we understand the notion that going to another country today is a dangerous thing to do. People simply are full of hate for everybody, and being in somebody else's country will always make you a target. But unfortunately, some people like Cubans and Venezuelans have just a bad situation in their own home country that they're better off with the adversaries that they're going to find elsewhere. And after all, when countries go into turmoil, people find no other option but to find somewhere new to live. And while that place may not be the greatest place on earth, it will at least be better than the turmoil in their home countries. So the real issue is that no matter how hard a country tries to make it for somebody else, the situation there will never be as bad as what those people are fleeing, which means that people are going to continue going to countries where they know things are bad for immigrants because they know that in their own home country, the situation is far more deadly. And of course, you still have to, in theory, treat people with some type of civil rights. And that means that for the most part, the situation in another country will always be better than your own if your country is in turmoil. Practically, take the case of Venezuelans and Haitians. Even if you were to detain people and let's say you went beyond that and went past the boundaries of civil rights, people would still come to the United States because that's still better than starving wherever they're at. And the treatment that they're getting over there by the criminal groups or law enforcement in their countries or whatever political or military coup has control there is definitely better than any type of mistreatment people could face here in the United States or Chile or another country, which means that even efforts to deter people by going outside of the legal boundaries doesn't really seem effective because the situation here will never be worse than whatever they're fleeing. So regardless, even acting outside of due process, acting outside of civil rights, and the treatment and handling of people who are crossing your country illegally doesn't really seem to work very much. Now, one thing that I have heard in many interviews from people in other countries is that out of all the countries in the world, nobody is more inhumane than the United States, where people are placed in what's known as a freezer. We've given them nothing but aluminum foil blankets to put them in a freezer for 30 days. Basically, the strategy of countries like Chile, the United States, and a few others is to catch somebody who's in their country illegally and torture them to the point where they cry for mercy and being deported. And this is what Chile and the United States are doing. They're grabbing people and they're practically forcing them to beg for a deportation by putting them in freezers and having nothing but aluminum foil for sleeping bags. And this type of inhumane treatment is something that we're not going to be able to pull a body cam footage for. We hear these stories and we know these stories exist because when people get deported, they tell the stories of how they are treated by these agencies. But it isn't like law enforcement where you can pull any type of footage, where these people could have any type of legal cases, which they don't because they're not in their home country regardless. But again, in the case of somebody, for example, who, for one, was allowed by an agency, the federal government, to enter the United States and have a court hearing, they do have rights because you allowed and you vetted their entry. You could have deported them on the spot, but you decided to let them enter the United States. Even if you're going to deport them in the future, at that point, they're established in the United States, not perhaps as a citizen or a resident, but perhaps you still have to now treat this person with due diligence because this individual is now not entering your country illegally. You vetted them and you allowed them to stay. That means that you should be able to have with that person the ability to pull body cam footage for their arrest. And if they're detained, request any type of information from their arrest, just like anybody else. So these ICE detentions is a gray area. So a lot of times people think, well, we live in a country where if you get arrested, you can always pull body cam footage. Let's not forget that law enforcement will always filter that footage before you get to it. This isn't some run-on thing. They edit it and they shop it. And if there's one officer who did something wrong, you're never going to get that footage. Don't believe that a records department is going to publish footage of their officers doing something wrong and then hand it to a news agency. That's not going to happen regardless. So when we talk about transparency in law enforcement, we like to believe that there's some type of accountability, but there really isn't. And in the particular individuals being arrested for these type of immigration arrest, how they're being handled, we don't know. But we do know that not just in the United States, but globally, these agencies usually have a tendency to extort people, demand information, and other words that we're not going to use on today's video, but they do whatever they want. After all, there isn't any accountability. All we have is the stories that we hear from the other side about how they were treated in that process. And when those stories seem to all collaborate the same progress, same process, the same situations, you can pretty much hold them as factual information, especially when the individual's intention in making these videos is to warn others about entering a country illegally and the dangers that overcome them. What many people don't understand is that when they go on these trajectories of crossing borders and going into places they're not supposed to be in, that they're going to encounter many dangers. Just like jumping into somebody's backyard, when you jump into somebody's country, you really lose a lot of rights. You're a nobody. You're in no man's land and you don't have rights there. So if something happens to you, it's kind of on you. Now in the United States, not too many people have had to flee for their freedoms or their lives yet. But if racial tensions and regionalism and whatever the crap keeps happening in this country happens, the same thing that's happening in other parts of the world where people have to flee their homes for racial tensions, ethnic violence, or whatever it may be, could one day be a problem here in the United States. And the same people who today tell people, I don't want immigrants in my country, are going to have to be an immigrant in somebody else's country themselves. After all, take Venezuelans. Venezuela used to be the richest country in Latin America. Venezuela used to have all the oil, all the Hummers, all the properties, and Venezuelans themselves were some of the most patriotic people who didn't let immigrants into their country. And where are they now today? Well, they happen to be the largest group of people fleeing internationally. So things can change, and individuals who today think that they're in their own territory and they don't want people in my country could one day be like the Venezuelans. The Venezuelans used to be just like you. The Venezuelans used to be just like Americans. They didn't let people into their country. They were the richest country in Latin America. Everything was going great. And now millions of them are dispersed in other countries, experiencing humiliations and disrespect that they themselves cast upon other people who used to go into Venezuela when things were better there. So of course it's easy for you in the United States to say you don't like immigrants when you've never been forced out of your home. Ukrainians didn't think that they were going to have to flee their homes and communities. Have you guys seen what Ukraine used to be like before this situation? Ukraine used to be one of the best countries in the world to live. The life there in Ukraine wasn't much different than life here in the United States. And today Ukrainians have had to leave their country. Do you think Ukrainians expected to be in another person's country? Have you guys seen what Ukraine used to look like? Your house in the United States isn't bigger than somebody's house in Ukraine, and you don't have as many zeros in your bank account as they do. You're living in a trailer in the United States or a house made out of cardboard. There's rich people in Mexico that are living better than rich people here in the United States. The problem in Mexico is criminal organizations and insecurity. It isn't like they're living in trailers over there like you are here. You think there aren't people in the Dominican Republic living in beachside mansions with beaches better than the ones you got here? You think there aren't people in Haiti that have a house bigger than a resort on the beach, a beach better than the one you got here? You think everybody from Honduras that's working construction here in the United States is starving? You don't know that there's people in Honduras that got houses bigger and better than one you got here? There's people in Honduras that have a whole mountain to themselves. Not half a mountain with a trailer on the side. Just people in the United States really don't understand the reasons why people leave their countries. Isn't because their countries are piles of garbage. Many times the houses, jobs, lifestyles, cars, and everything they had back in their home country was better, but it was an insecurity, a safety concern that made them come to the United States. And many times those people are loaded, and they decide to live a low-profile life here in the United States to not draw too much attention. But don't think just because somebody's here in the United States from another country that they don't have more money than you. They might keep a lower profile than you, but you have no idea how much money and wealth those people have in their home countries. You think there aren't rich neighborhoods in Venezuela a block away from the beach? You think just every other country is this starving crap hole? That's not really the reality of the global situation. Every country has rich people, elites, and in fact, in other countries, the elites have more power than they do in the United States. They can get away with things that you here in the United States can't get away with. They can do things that you're not allowed to do here. The problem in Latin America right now is ineffective governments and violence and corruption. It isn't that every person in Latin America is starving and wants to come to the United States. People in this country have just a level of ignorance. It's like all you got to do is on Google Maps. Just look at Google Maps and see what other countries look like. You know, see the houses, see the places, see the businesses, see the cars that people drive, and you're like, wow, there's money all over the world. It isn't just the United States. In fact, about a year ago, we went to Canada, and the standard of living for the average Canadian far surpasses the standard of living for Americans. Toronto is the most diverse city in the world, and their homicide rate is about an eighth of the average American city. Safety in Canada far surpasses safety in the United States. The most dangerous cities in Canada would be the most safe cities in the United States by homicide rate. That should just give you an idea how much safer Canada is than the United States. You don't have to worry about many of the problems that we're plagued with when it comes to safety in Canada. It is a far safer country. Obviously, the biggest problem with Canada is the weather. It's horrendously cold there. But if Canada had better weather, it would be a much better option to live than the United States. Their immigration policies are considerably better than the United States. I mean, just recently, the United States started talking about the $5 million thing. Canada's been doing that forever. Most immigrants in Canada are some of the wealthiest people in the world. It's made their country a very safe and prosperous place to live. In Canada, you see people walking, jogging, and biking. In America, you see people eating a cheeseburger. Without a doubt, the people in Canada are much healthier. Their products are more clean, more organic. And did I forget to mention that people in Canada also benefit from the fact that their country hasn't been turned into an absolute urban nightmare. Most of Canada is just beautiful, untouched landscapes. They densely pack their cities and they control development so that the outskirts of cities are nothing but pristine wilderness. They haven't destroyed Canada with roads and all types of horrific, destructive practices. The goal of their urban planning is to keep cities compact and most of the country pristine, while the goal of urban planning in the United States is to turn every beautiful natural area into a parking lot. It's a very orderly country. In America, people break the laws liberally, and in Canada, the law is very strict. The fines are very excessive. It makes for a very organized and well-run society with very little space for misappropriation. So, American cities look like a dump, a war zone. Canadian cities look like model cities. I mean, you could say that the average city in Canada looks better, and of course, they haven't destroyed their wilderness. Canada has more wilderness than anything in the United States by percentage. They've just done a really good job of protecting their country, while we've done a job of destroying our country here in the United States. If it wasn't for the cold weather, I would be living in Canada. I just don't like the cold weather. I'm a tropical person, and their immigration requirements are just way too strict. I like the United States where I can easily sneak my way in. Easily, I became a U.S. citizen. It wasn't that hard, so it's real easy to get your foot through the door here in the United States. Where in Canada, they're more strict and stuff like that, So it's a great, beautiful country, but between the weather and how hard it is to get your foot through the door, and you got to follow all these rules, Here in the United States, you have the freedom. You can do whatever you want. You can speed. You can burn your neighbor's house. You can just do whatever the crap you want in the United States. And you don't have to worry about repercussions from the law. Where in Canada, it's really like a country of law and order. That's why I like the United States, because it's a little bit more lawless. You can just do whatever you want. I saw a cop the other day. I was like, hey, get out of my hood, dog. And the cop was like, please don't hurt me. I'm just doing my job. You know what I'm saying? So, in America, you can just do whatever you want. You know what I'm saying? I see a cop, I put a camera in his face. Get him out. Get my hood, dog. Get out of my hood. The cop, please, sir. I'm just doing my job. Nah, man, I don't like the way you was guarding my community, dog. You know what I'm saying? It's just a real natural law and order tendency that Canadians have. Canadians are like what Americans used to be like 40 years ago. That's how I would describe it. Just like got a house, got a job, go for a walk and stuff like that. We ain't trying to do that, man. We're trying to put gas in the car and and have plenty of parking spaces available and stuff like that. So like I said, I would live in Canada, but then they have real immigration policies and stuff like that I probably couldn't meet, and then it would be cold. So that's why I'm not in Canada. And in Canada, they're also much more educated than the United States. I just saw the Canadian president give a speech in English and then flip back around and did it in French, man. He was like, Hakmug, He started talking in French, merci beaucoup and stuff. I was like, man. In the United States, they try to rebrand everything. There's a lot of Spanish stuff in the United States. There's more Spanish stuff in America than there is French stuff in Canada. But in Canada, they embrace and protect their French heritage, while in the United States, they try to eliminate, erase, and rebrand everything that has a Spanish word in it. And that's just the reality too, is just the backwardness of people in the United States. In Canada, I think they have a much better health care. They have better education. Just public services in general are better in Canada. And that's just the reality of it. It's a better place to live, but it's freezing cold. You know what I'm saying? And they'll probably deport me. So I would be in Canada, but like I'm in Florida because it's warm here and I probably won't get deported. You know what I'm saying? But anyways, the purpose of today's video, it would be good to know exactly who's getting deported. Just like we get arrest records, I think we should be able to get deportation records. And just the public in general should just kind of know who's being deported and why. I don't understand why it's dealt with so much secrecy. It's kind of like we can't know who it is. It all has to be a mystery. And of course, when something's a mystery, it's because there's something to hide. If there's nothing to hide, then there's no problem with accountability. But the reality is that we know very little information and get very little accountability from people who are being deported. Why is that the case? I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions. I think it would be great. I don't see how it could be a national threat to know who's getting kicked out of here. If anything, it'd be good to know who's getting deported, because that way we know who's not in our community anymore. And if they enter the community again, we know if they've already been deported. It's almost counterintuitive why you wouldn't want people to know this information. But hey, I don't work for the Homeland Security. I'm just a YouTuber, and that's just my personal opinion that I'm entitled to. Yes, I would live in Canada if they could grow palm trees up there, but they can't. And they will deport me because they're not going to put up with me up there. And they're so nice and kind and welcoming to their immigrant communities in Canada. I mean, like, I saw people of Arabic descent wearing their national dress. You see the Hindus wearing their Hindu clothes. You see the Punjabis wearing their Punjabi clothes. It feels like in Canada, immigrants can like really be who they are and not be afraid of being who they are. Where here in the United States, immigrants almost have to like pretend we're Americans just so that we don't have to deal with racism on a daily basis. So I recently did a video on Cubans, and I'm going to read some of the comments we got on that video so you can see how Americans really feel about Cubans. Now this is Hialeah, Florida. This person says, Hialeah is the biggest Medicare fraud city in the country. This person just goes on a rant about how horrible Hialeah is for defrauding Americans. But there's so many great things you could say about Hialeah. Hialeah has one of the lowest homicide rates in the United States. Despite being 100% urban, it is less than half the national average for the homicide rate. So this person could have said something nice about Hialeah, like it's analytically the safest city in America at size, but they decided to say something nasty, that Hialeah is full of fraud. Well, yeah, no place is perfect. There's been a lot of fraud in Hialeah, but it's one of the safest cities in the country. I bet the city you live in isn't safer than Hialeah. Analytically, it can't be possible. I kind of tricked these peoples into making these comments because I led them on to believe on the video that they could make these comments just so they can get it off their chest. But I really want to show you guys how these people really feel about the immigrant communities in the United States, like particularly the Cubans, especially Cubans in particular. The cities that have the most Cubans are some of the safest cities in the United States, just like in Toronto, where it's the most diverse city in Canada. And in Toronto, they have one of the safest homicide rates of any city internationally. The same thing happens in Hialeah. What does that tell you? It tells you that the plague of violence that we have in this country doesn't come from immigrants. It comes from native-born people. And it's analytically provable. But, try to tell an American that, violence is a bad thing. They'll tell you that violence is good. This person named Erica seems to be very happy over the fact that Cubans are getting deported. Leon Noble says it's about time that Cubans get deported. That's not very nice. Michael says, please leave now. Don't run from ICE. ICE. It's very disrespectful. Eddie says Cubans don't come here legally. Well, that's interesting because the wet foot, dry foot law meant that most Cubans that came before it was removed, Obama's last day in office, and the Cuban that came before then in 1966, all they had to do was touch U.S. soil with their wet foot, dry foot law, and they were legal. So the overwhelming majority of Cubans are illegal, but this person's so ignorant that he says Cubans don't come here legally. And it just goes to show that in the United States, even if you're legal or not, they're going to treat you like an illegal either way. And that's what most Cubans are having a hard time understanding. Cubans think that because they're legal and they live in Miami. And by the way, if you live in Miami, shut your mouth. I don't want to hear your opinion about Cubans in America if you live in Miami, because if you're in Miami, you still haven't left Cuba. Move to Arkansas, move to Alabama for a year, and then come back and talk to me about living in Miami. Because if you live in Miami, you still haven't left Cuba. Don't tell me that you live in Miami, you've never experienced racism, because you're still in Cuba. So when you leave Miami, if you live in Miami, shut up about this topic. I don't want to hear your opinion if you live in Miami. Andy says that he used to go pick up Cubans during that time when Cubans would come here legally, but if they were Haitians, he'd let them drown. That's a horrible thing to say. Even if that was true, I wouldn't even repeat that. That's just horrific. So in Florida, they told Cubans that they wouldn't get deported unless they had criminal charges, and they're already deporting Cubans left and right. This individual still doesn't believe it. Even though I listed 4 people who don't have criminal charges that are Cubans and are being deported, this person still doesn't want to believe it. Because what happened in Florida is they told Cubans, oh, we're not going to deport Cubans unless they have criminal charges. Well, they're deporting Cubans left and right who don't have criminal charges. So this whole thing, it was like a big lie that they told Cubans in Florida just to keep them calm, you know. They said, oh, we're not going to deport Cubans, so don't have to worry. But they're already deporting Cubans. And when I listed 4 arrests of Cubans that are being deported without criminal charges, now they're still not believing it, even though you can go to Pinellas in Sarasota County and look up these arrests of Cubans that are being deported with no criminal charges. Some people just want to believe lies, and if you tell them the truth, it isn't going to change them. They want to believe the lie they're told. Clearly, they've already started deporting Cubans that don't have criminal charges. They told you that lie just so they could, let you cool off, and they don't want to just how we say in Spanish, do it raw, and they just kind of want to woo with you a little first. Kay Jackson says she wants to see not just Cubans deported, but all of them deported. Oh, so let's go all the way back to the Irish potato famine when, because the Irish weren't allowed to. What made you think the Irish were allowed to come here? They weren't allowed to come here. Who told you the Irish came here illegally? They were not allowed to come here. Anybody leaving England or Ireland was breaking the law. It was illegal for them to leave their country. All of the descendants of English and Irish that are here in the United States broke the English law. They were not allowed to leave England. They were forbidden from doing it. Remember, they were fleeing political injustice, religious injustice. You had the Pilgrims that came for religious freedom. And then you also had the potato famine survivors. You guys were starving over there. So as far as I'm concerned, you guys didn't come here illegally either. So how far back do you want to go with that? And then you got the people who say, we want you to come here, but we want you to do it legally. Well, listen to what Sharon says. She says, no wet foot, no dry foot, no barefoot, no to traitors, adios, bye. So this whole notion that if you come here illegally, we accept you. No, you don't. Look at Sharon's comment. She doesn't care if you're wet foot, dry foot, or barefoot. They don't want you here. And stop telling people this whole lie of, we want you to do it legally. That is a lie that politicians tell people so that people who support their party but are not racist can feel okay supporting an ideology that's racist. It's a way to sugarcoat the reality of racism in politics to people who believe in a political party but don't share that hateful ideology by statements like, we want you to do it legally. All they're doing is sugarcoating the racism so people who support their political party don't have to feel guilty about the racism that is associated with that party. But at the end of the day, the whole notion of we want you to do it legally, that's not what Sharon believes. That's not what Sharon believes. She says she doesn't want you here, period. So this whole notion of we want you to do it legally, no, you don't. That's not the way everybody sees it. That's not even true. That's a lie that is spread by a lot. There are people that believe you should come here legally. Like, I believe people should come here legally. But does that mean that I sympathize with the ideology of hating people and not wanting nobody to hear here like this person does? Come on now. Come on. We're not stupid. But come on now. You know better than that. You're not going to sugarcoat reality for me. I know how you really feel. This whole we want you to come legally thing, no, that's a load of crap. That's a sugarcoat. Most people who are against immigration are not doing it from a place of law and order. They're doing it from a place of, hey, read Sharon's comment again. If you missed it, rewind this video and read Sharon's comment. That's exactly how they feel. It's not about legal or illegal. It's about anti-Hispanic sentiment. And this is what a lot of Cubans in Miami don't understand. They just don't get that it doesn't matter if you're legal or not. How many of these comments have we seen already? Like 2 of them already. They clearly denote the fact that they don't care if you're legal or not. It's not about legality. It's about hate. They don't want you here. They don't care if you're legal. In fact, reading some of these comments, and if you're legal, they hate you even more for that. They don't want you here. This is the reality of being an immigrant in the United States, that a lot of these people simply don't want you here. And it has nothing to do with the economy, has nothing to do with safety. It has to do with hate. It has nothing to do with legality. Half of the people saying that, if you pull up their names, they don't respect the laws. There's somebody who's a drug addict, breaks the law, has a criminal record. I recently talking to some homeless people. They're like, well, if you're going to do it, you got to come here legally. I said, are you legal? You've been arrested for possession, trespassing. You're not legal yourself. Everything you do is illegal. So how are you, performing all types of illegalities, going to sit here and tell me that somebody else is being illegal? You're illegal. Substances are illegal. Trespassing is illegal. You're illegal in many senses yourself. At least they're illegal to work to feed their families, and you're illegal because you're an addicted person who likes to break the law. Totally different reasons. Calandra Williams says they need to go home. This is the sentiment. This person here says, I'm white. I've been complaining about the influx of Cubans since I visited Florida in 1961. Well, you know what you could do, white man? You can go to Alabama. Because when it comes to Florida, we own this. Let me just show you some of the properties that Hispanics own here in Florida. Miguel Fernandez owns this piece of Florida here in Coral Gables. One of the nicest, safest cities in the United States. Look at this property, guys. This guy is right on the water. His house is almost an island. Miguel Fernandez owns this piece of Florida. What are you going to do about it? Right across the street from them, the Garcia family owns this one. I love the boat that they have out back in the palm trees. Beautiful home. Check out how Jorge Luis Cruz is living in Miami. Look at the size of his boat. It barely fits in his dock. How did this guy get so much money? Look at this property in Miami. He's doing pretty good. Reynaldo Acosta III has a modest home in Miami. 2 good-sized boats. He's living all right. Look at this comment here, guys. Every one of them on our welfare system. No thanks. There's a vet that needs those services. Get out. I don't think this is public housing. I'm pretty sure you have to buy this of legitimately earned money. It's a big house.